Hello and welcome to this breaking news episode of Montclair News Lab. I'm Terry Dickerson. Here's the story as we recorded this late on Wednesday. On Saturday, the Palestinian militant group Hamas launched a devastating attack on Israel. A combination of missiles and on-the-ground terrorist attacks came from the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip and left 1,200 Israelis dead and over 150 hostages taken by Hamas. Many of the dead and hostages are civilians. Israel has vowed to destroy Hamas, launching retaliatory air attacks on Gaza. 1,100 Gaza residents have been killed, according to Gaza health officials. The Israeli government mobilized over 300,000 army reservists, and many believe an Israeli invasion of Gaza is imminent. NewsLab reporters are following the story, talking to people on the ground in Israel and here in New Jersey to get an understanding of what's going on. NewsLab's Nino Danino sat down with Israeli journalist Erez Lin, managing editor of the English edition of Israel Today. Lin takes us through what it's been like both personally and as a journalist.
Hello, my name is Nino Danino, and today I am joined by Erez Lin, the managing editor of the English edition of Israel Hayom, also known as Israel Today, which is one of Israel's leading source for national news. Thank you for joining us today, Erez.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to start off, could you take us back to Saturday when the event started and tell us what's going on in Israel right now?
This Saturday was not just any normal Saturday. It was the end of the Sukkot holiday. So it was one of the main religious holidays for those who are religious. That's when Jews finish reading the entire Torah, which is one of the sacred books of the Jewish scripture. So everybody was either vacationing or anticipating the moment where the actual finishing the Torah would take place, which normally takes place at the synagogue around noon, I guess. I'm not religious, but whatever, the holidays, the celebration would have taken place all day. But none of this happened, obviously, because even before many people woke up, Hamas launched the terrorist attack at around 6:30 a.m., starting with the barrage of rockets. I think about 3,000 rockets in 1 hour. That was probably a distraction so that it could neutralize the cameras along the border with Gaza, and then slaughtered basically the women and men guarding the fence, and then proceeded to slaughter about 1,000 people along the border who live there, which is, they practically invaded every settlement, every community along the border. And in some communities, I think 10% of the community is just wiped out. And in many cases, the physical structure of the community is wiped out. Practically every building or a significant portion is torched, firebombed, and gone. So, and of course, there's I think about 300 fatalities in a rave, a nature party that took place somewhere in between those communities, which I'm not sure that Hamas knew that it was taking place, but I guess it realized that it's an opportune moment to kill as many people. And apparently they trapped them. They started firing, like in many active shooter cases, people hear the shots, they run away, and they went into their cars and tried to flee the scene. But the scene became one big traffic jam. So all the cars were perfectly lined up for shooting. So apparently, if the reports are correct, Hamas just saw the people trying to flee and just fired on all the cars. That made all the casualties that much worse. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, this is about 1,000, at least 1,000 dead Israelis. Not all are Israelis, some are foreign residents, including, I think, Italians and Germans and whatever. And it's basically 9/11 plus Pearl Harbor put together in Israeli terms. We have never had anything of that nature.
Would you be able to take me through some of your firsthand experiences within this war? What have you seen?
Luckily, I didn't have to go into the actual horrific sites where the murders took place in the south, but Hamas made sure that everyone outside that area would feel the conflict. So they fired missiles, as they do in every hostilities. But in this case, they fired the missiles because they knew that Israel was preparing for an offensive. So I think 2 days ago, a missile fell just across from my building. In fact, if I'll move a bit, you see behind me those gaps in the blinds.
Yeah.
Those are because the blinds just literally fell off because of the blast, that the missile that hit the building across. Luckily, this part of the building is not facing exactly where the missile hit, but still the blast shattered windows all over the block. And luckily, in Israel, we have this Iron Dome system, and we have a early detection system. So we got about a minute warning when the missile was launched. So I went, like everyone else in my building, to the shelter, which is about 5 or 6 floors down, all the way underground. And I heard the boom. First time that I heard something explode literally next to me, because in other cases you could hear the booms, but it's just like one big thunder. But in this case, it was clear that it fell nearby. After about a minute, after the siren, I went up to see what was going on the street, and I literally saw debris all over. I saw a car burning, and of course I saw the actual missile impact site, which I think you saw the pictures of, which basically destroyed the entire floor in the building across from me.
What have you seen while reporting and speaking to families out in the field?
Normally, in a conflict and hostilities between Hamas and Israel, there's outbursts of either happiness on the Arab side or fanaticism and revenge on the Jewish side. In this conflict, because it's so huge and people are still in shock, I think, you don't see any reaction besides on social media. There's no riots on the street, not in the Arab side and not in the Jewish side. There is a lot of people have put aside all the domestic strife that we've had since the new government has come to power. So Netanyahu may have what he would call his Churchill moment. He's always compared himself to Churchill. So maybe that's his moment. On the other hand, if history is any guide, when a government loses a war or is shown to have not prepared properly to a war, in Israeli history, in every case, prime ministers go home shortly after the war is concluded, because they have, even if the war is successful, they have not been able to properly prepare for the war. And so in this case, because we were caught off guard and we lost the first day, I mean, even though the war itself is still to be determined, because so many died on the first day, politically, Netanyahu might not be able to recover, but Netanyahu is, I think, different than the others. So I think if he manages, I mean, just my speculation, it's not my paper's view, but if he manages to make this tragedy into something in a defining moment that changes the entire Middle East, or at least changes Israel's relations with the Arabs, he could survive and people actually may forgive him. But right now, people are, even his most vociferous critics are subdued. No one's on the street. No one's attacking anyone. People are just, I've never seen anything like this. People are very united.
Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Lin. And as from Montclair, right here in Montclair, we appreciate and we admire your determination to your job. And we appreciate all the reporting that you do to us.
Thank you for having me. If you ever need anything, let me know.
Thank you.
In Tel Aviv, Ariel Karlinsky, a PhD student of economics at Hebrew University, is currently sheltering with his family. News Lab reporter Gloria Perez discussed the situation with him over Zoom 1 hour after his neighborhood was under attack.
We are the lucky ones, I guess. I live in Tel Aviv, which is right down in the center of Israel, and most of the attacks by now have been in the more southern regions closer to Gaza. So we have, a couple of attacks a day by now. We run down to the shelter and we wait to hear the Iron Dome, usually intercepting the missiles. So far, it's very, very unpleasant. Very hard to concentrate on anything. Me and a lot of my friends try to volunteer whatever we can, whether it's food, necessities, blood donation, stuff like that for wounded. And some of my friends have been conscripted. to reserve duty. And everything is sort of on standby by now, in a sense, and we're constantly on edge.
And when you say like go to the shelter, what exactly do you mean by that?
It depends on where you are and what you have. So most buildings have some sort of basement, which is for the entire building, and its main purpose is to defend against, is to shelter down in place in case of a rocket attack. We've had those here since I remember them. I remember them since the first Gulf War in 1991. There have been some attacks before that, but it wasn't very commonplace. But the shelter building, there are newer apartments where there's a room inside every apartment that is reinforced, which makes it easier for people to go. Now, as I said, we're in Tel Aviv. We're sort of lucky because we have very good automatic detection in the Iron Dome, and from the time of the siren to the time of impact, we have about 1 minute to go down to the shelter, which is a lot of time in a sense. Places more nearby Gaza have like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So they essentially live in a shelter.
You mentioned that the attacks so far have not really been near your region of Israel. Are you scared about like the attacks coming up towards your area, and like what do you think could possibly occur if that happens?
Right now I'm more worried about friends and family who have been drafted or are closer to either Gaza or Lebanon. Most of the victims, most of the fatalities by now have not been from rockets because, again, we have the Iron Dome and stuff like that and sheltering in place. But, this terrorists that just took over like small villages near Gaza, and that's been thwarted, I hope. So I don't think there's a lot of chance for terrorists to, march up to Tel Aviv. But yeah, we have had several rounds of these, rocket attack going back and forth between Gaza and Israel in the last few years. This is by far the scariest this has been, and the closest to home, and just god awful scale of death. So yeah, I'm more distraught than scared, I guess.
How has this like affected your friends and family? Are you able to contact them in any way?
Yeah. We have almost like a ceremony of anytime there's a siren, wherever my friends or family are, we check in on each other, make sure everyone's okay. Not really sure what we'll do if someone says, "Oh, actually, we've been hit." But we have friends and suggested to friends that if something happens to them, they can come be with us, or the other way around. True for family as well.
Have you noticed like any like false information or anything that like could potentially like cause more issues? Like have you like read into anything like that?
And no, there are all these hot takes, this, whether it's a professor or a celebrity, this person said something extremely stupid, and then this guy corrected him, and that female professor said that they were wrong, and what about the plight of the Palestinians, and what about people in Lebanon? And it's also a bit hard to track and a bit hard to engage because it's also here. So I'm not really, in a sense, I also try to consume content which is not about this because I'm living it right now. So I don't need it coming at me from my phone screen and my computer screen at all times. I can hear the rockets here. I don't need someone to tell me, "Oh my God, there's been another rocket attack in Tel Aviv, #Free Palestine" or something. I don't know.
How does it affect like, your normal daily life? Like you say that you feel like you're not very productive right now, but even like everyday things like grocery shopping or like just stuff like that, like how has it been affecting you in that way?
I live in a neighborhood which is sort of like it's not the geographical downtown of Tel Aviv, but it's it's a place where A lot of bars are, a lot of clubs are, a lot of restaurants, a lot of coffee shops. And everything looks like a ghost town, basically. There's most places are either closed or only open for like takeaway. It sort of kind of looks like the strictest part of the COVID lockdowns, a little bit. Very few people in the streets. I had to do a few, like you said, like grocery shopping and stuff like that with my car, and very little traffic when there's usually rush hours. Most people have either, as I said, maybe gone to maybe places which are even farther away from rocket attack, or are sort of just staying in place. A lot of workplaces are more than accommodating to work from home. So in a sense, again, pretty similar to the COVID lockdowns. And everything is very, very much on edge. As I drove to, whatever I had to do, I drove much slower. I didn't hear the radio, which I usually do, because I'm trying to always be on the lookout in case there's a siren and I need to take shelter.
So do you feel that this situation has brought like the community of Israel more together?
For sure, 100%. It's always this was always the case and always will be the case, I guess. Especially when the attack is very heavily, as I said, like anti-Semitic. So are you Jewish?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so there's a famous Jewish joke that two Jews, three opinions. So Israeli society is very, very divided, especially these days, this year, especially on many, 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 many issues, including the Palestinian issue. So I think if the attack was, I don't know how to say it, much milder, and maybe would have targeted more settlements rather than kibbutzim, which are more like mainstream Israel in a sense, I think it could have kept Israel very divided. But the fact that this goes hand in hand with Gaza Jews, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It doesn't really matter if you're very religious or very secular or on the left or on the right. You band together as people of Israel against like a common foe.
From Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, people in Israel are on edge. News Lab's Trevor Schwartz spoke with Jordan Siegel, an American who's currently in the capital of Israel.
I live in Jerusalem, so the sirens don't go off here too often. And actually a friend of mine just texted me and was like, "Are you okay? I heard there's like sirens in Jerusalem." So I heard something kind of in the distance, and I woke my roommate. Um, and then she, was like, "Yeah, there is something." And then like throughout the day, we kind of kept hearing them more and more, and we kept hearing them like closer and closer. Um, Thankfully, they weren't close enough where we really had to run into our bomb shelter. But we did feel it. We felt like the vibrations the entire day. We heard the sirens the entire day, and just seeing like all the hostages being taken, and the whole like all the infiltrations and everything like that. It's just like absolutely heartbreaking to see what's happening to this country. And this whole week was just like a holiday, and we've just been like celebrating and having fun. Um, and to think that in a matter of like a day, it's just the whole world changed.
And I'm sure there's a tons of fear even just stepping right outside.
Yeah, like I mean, I live in like a town, but yeah, it's definitely just it's eerie. There's not as many people as there were outside literally like a week ago. But we took a walk, like my roommate and I, we took a walk earlier today for just 10 minutes or something, turned around just to get some fresh air. And you can definitely see people trying to return to normalcy just by taking their kids out to the playground and stuff like that. Um, but there's still not a lot of people out. There's first of all, there's nothing open, and they did just issue shelter in place for the next 3 days.
So, Rabbi, following the tragic event on Saturday in Israel, how do you process this horrific event?
I don't know that any of us have really fully processed it yet. At this point, more than 1,000 Israelis were killed, the most on any single day since the Holocaust. Just to give your viewers a sense of what that means, that's probably equivalent in terms of proportion to 35,000 Americans, more than 10 times the number killed on 9/11. And sadly, we know the numbers keep rising. We don't even have the full picture yet. Women, children, babies murdered.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the American Jewish Committee's response is to this event?
American Jewish Committee, for your viewers who don't know who we are the oldest global advocacy organization for the Jewish people in the world. So we are bringing all our resources together to do a number of things. One, to advocate on behalf of Israel and on behalf of her defense and make sure that she has everything she needs to defend herself and be secure. We are certainly keeping our eyes open to the potential for anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic acts rising out of this crisis. And we have brought together our lay leaders from across the country to raise money for humanitarian needs in Israel, to raise money for hospitals and trauma centers and all of the medical needs that have grown out of this attack.
So we know this is a complex situation, but can you characterize this for students who haven't been following the long history between Israel and Palestine?
There's a long history between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It goes back to 1948 when the UN created a partition plan and offered a state for the Palestinian people and a state for the Jewish people. The Jewish people accepted it. The Palestinian people did not. And in fact, there was an attack on Israel back in 1948 to try to, as some of the armies said, to push the Jews off into the ocean, into the sea, and eliminate any possibility of Israel. So it goes back to its very beginnings, and from those very beginnings, Israel has hoped to have two states for two people living side by side. Actually, the dream is living side by side in some level of friendship and working at peace with each other. Sadly, that hasn't been the history, but that's not what's happening now.
So what do you think will happen next after this? What are the risks for Israel, the people of Gaza, and all the hostages that were taken by Hamas?
And I have to say, my heart is with innocent civilians and people in Gaza who are under the heel, if you will, of Hamas, who don't have the ability to fight this terrorist group themselves. And there have been and are going to be more civilian casualties in Gaza, and that is fully the responsibility of Hamas.
What do you say to those who have been saying that this massacre was a result of the Israeli policies?
You know, there's no justification for shooting babies and beheading babies. There's no justification for going door to door and killing whole families. There's no justification for kidnapping children and their mothers and dragging them into Gaza and using them as human shields. There's no justification for this terrorism.
So what do you say to people, and especially people my age, like you mentioned, that are seeing what's happening on social media? It's very graphic content that has been leaked all over social media. What do you say to people who are processing that?
I know that you get much of your news from social media. My caveat has to be is that social media is manipulated and very manipulative. Hamas is using social media. A lot of the graphic things that you're seeing online are being put out by the terrorists to create despair, to create a form of online terrorism. I would say if you're a good media consumer, you're also turning to the standard media, that you're turning to New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, looking at a variety of media sources and being an educated consumer of that media, and realizing that especially in places like Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, people are using it to twist the narrative, and people are using it sometimes for malign ends.
Finally, Rabbi, what would your message be to young people who may be confused about seeing all of this, that hadn't been following, and now it's everywhere? And you don't want to ignore it. You want to get involved. You want to develop your own ideas about it. How do you want to, shed some advice to them?
Some of the best things you can do, again, reading legitimate news sources and really pursuing those news sources. You can go to our website, ajc.org. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're a Jewish pro-Israel organization, but we're nonpartisan. There are ways of educating yourself through reading, through taking classes, through reaching out, honestly, reaching out to people like myself and others who do have the knowledge and can share it.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We've learned a lot, and I really appreciate your time.
Sure, thank you. And just know that we all join together in prayers for peace for all people and prayers for peace in the region. And the hope that the next time you and I talk, it will be about happier subjects.
We thank all of our guests who shared their stories so openly. For all of us here at Montclair News Lab, I'm Terry Dickerson.